To be attainted as a traitor. Written and read by Mysaria. Chapter 2. Mysaria. As hands seized her and her prince did nothing, she felt numb. So utterly, terrifyingly numb. When it was announced that she would be going back to Liz, that horrible numbness was broken and she wished rather desperately for it to return. Liz. She was to go to Liz and he still did nothing. The betrayal stung. It hurt. It felt like her heart was being ripped apart, torn into a million bloody pieces by a vicious beast. A vicious beast that had pressed tender kisses into her skin, that had caressed her belly with such incredible softness, that had whispered sweet promises into her ears, and had now changed its mind. Mysaria was not worthy. Their babe was not worthy. No, compared to the king, they had both been nothing to the prince, not worthy of true care and affection. As she was led away and the prince spoke nothing, no words of farewell, a bitterness rose in her and hate grew in her. As her eyes filled with tears, she fought them. She fought them and she fed them to her hate. She had been betrayed for the last time, she promised herself. Never again would she allow a man such power over her. Never again would she be fool enough to give everything up on hope. Her face remained smooth even as a snarl wished to make itself known. Love. She had not even realized that was what she had felt for him until her heart bled at his betrayal. Never again, she resolved. Never. Mysaria had been born a slave, had been trained to entertain men and women with her body, had been used and abused and sold, and she had never felt pain quite like this. No more. She was led below decks to a cabin that would serve her on the journey, and she supposed she should be grateful for the kindness, but she could not make herself be grateful for anything. She had reached for the sun and had believed it hers for a few short moons, and now it was gone. It was all gone. Now she knew it had never truly belonged to her in the first place. Could never have belonged to someone like her. Someone of no value. Mysaria collapsed to her knees onto the pallet and cried. She would not allow herself tears later. She would not allow them ever again, but now. Now her heart was broken and she could not hold on to them anymore. She lay woodenly on the pallet, exhausted by her weeping, head aching, straw digging into her soft flesh even through the fabric, and wished for sleep to take her. How could she have been so foolish? How had she not known better? When cries of alarm rose above deck, a small hope sparked in her. Was there a disaster coming? Would she be spared returning to Liz by sweet, merciful death? She would not seek to end her own life, not while carrying another, but if death were to come and claim her, she would welcome it with open arms. But as the cries grew louder and clearer, and she grew to understand them, a different hope sparked and swiftly grew into an inferno. Dragon. There was a dragon. Was it? Could it be? Hers? She sat up and wiped at her cheeks roughly, even though the tears had dried hours ago, and then ran nervous hands over her hair hastily and rose. Her hand paused before she pushed the door of the cabin open. She had promised herself never to let hope make a fool of her again mere hours ago, and here she was, hoping, once more. But what else was left to her but hope? There was no escape left to her now other than death. Mysaria unlatched the door and walked to the deck gracefully, with her head held high, chin raised haughtily, affecting nonchalance. Her coolness left her with her breath, and her eyes grew wide when she saw the red dragon precariously perch on the deck, and its rider deftly jump down to it. Her heart seized. Hearing him say that he came for her, that she belonged with him, was... Tears spilled from her eyes once more, despite whatever promises she had made herself. Mayhaps it had not been a fool's hope after all. When he had spoken his offer, though, oh, she knew she was dreaming then, but it was a beautiful dream, and she did not wish to wake up. Not now, not ever. Still, tears rolled down her face, tears of regret, for even in a dream she knew it was not true. It was not real, and that deserved all the tears she had left. She rested her head on her prince's shoulder once atop Caraxes and closed her eyes, breathing him in. It was a sweet dream, and it felt so, so real. A strange peace settled over Mysaria as they landed on Driftmark, as she was presented to the princess, and as she was shown to a chamber, and washed and dried and combed and dressed. She felt a stranger in her own body, merely an observer of events happening around her. Only when the night fell, and she was led to a stone altar where the groom awaited her, and she joined him there, and the first cut on her lip was made, did feeling return to her, and oh, what a feeling! Fire spread from where gentle fingers tilted her chin up and the tiny cut on her lip. Her eyes burned as her own hand made a cut on her prince's lip, and she saw blood pearl there. As a cut was made across her palm, it burned, and when their hands were joined to bleed into the chalice together, her very blood was set aflame. And when she drank of their mixed blood, and they sealed their union with a kiss that mixed their blood on their lips and tongues together, she felt drunk on it, the flames of her blood pulsing with the beat of her heart. When they parted at long last, and she looked into the eyes of her prince, her husband, she was no longer convinced it was a dream. It could not be, for even Mysaria's dreams knew some things were not possible. For even in her dreams, she had never dared to hope to see the fire and the softness she saw mix in his eyes then. She drew him into another kiss, as if entranced. There was a feast afterward, Mysaria knew, and yet she could never recall it after, too focused on her husband, too afraid she would blink and that he would be gone. It could not be true, a part of her knew, and yet another, louder, knew that the fire was real. Mysaria would never know to imagine the fire in her blood, not in such a way. Her blood was aflame still, and only one thing could put it out now. She knew it with every fiber of her body. She knew and she wanted. When her husband lifted her to carry her to their wedding chamber, she laid her head on his shoulder once more, and she laid her hand over his heart. And then, once they were out of the feast hall and in a corridor, she shifted and brought her lips and her tongue to his throat, and when his steps sped up, she smirked against his skin and redoubled her efforts. When the door to the chamber slammed close behind them and she stood on her feet once more, some of her wits returned to her, even as they kissed fervently and she was pushed back toward the bed. A different fire rose in her. A fire previously unknown, and courage rose with it. This was wrong. She was angry at him. He had betrayed her. He had let them take her, take them. This was wrong. Her anger overpowered her lust for him at last, and she placed her hands on his shoulders and pushed at them with all her strength. He stumbled back, blinking in confusion, lips red and kiss swollen, and she had to fight her own desire for him immediately at the picture he made. What? You betrayed me. Her words were calm, though she was far from it. You let them take me. Take your child. I am angry. Nay, I am furious with you. Her voice weakened considerably, turning into a whisper. You betrayed me, and you have not even asked for my forgiveness. I left everything behind for you. You let them put their filthy hands on me and take me away. There was regret in his eyes, and she was glad to see it, but he was silent still. He was silent for far too long, and she wished to hit him, to throw things at him, to kiss him, to take him inside her and be reminded that it was all over, that he was hers now, truly and completely. He took a careful step towards her and raised his arm halfway, and then let it drop to his side, shaking his head. Had I fought them, you would have been hurt. She supposed that was true enough, but she had seen his eyes as they took her, and there had been no fight in them. He had not wished to fight then, and so she told him, You meant to let them take me away. You meant to obey. Something changed, and it was not your feelings for us. His eyes were so incredibly sad. It hurt to look into them, but she steeled herself against it. I thought about what it meant for you to return to Liz, the danger to you and to the babe. I thought on it all, and yet the thing that made me act. No, it was not about you. It was about me. I loved my brother all my life, and all my life I fought to have his love in return. After you were taken, I realized that it mattered not what I did. I would never truly have it. And if I were to never have it, how could I let them take away my only chance at true happiness? Now, she was truly and absolutely certain this was not and could not be a dream. She would have dreamt a different answer. So it was merely your selfishness that guided you. Truly, she should not be so disappointed, nor surprised. He was a prince. She was a former slave. Nothing truly bound them together. Nothing but the babe. Her eyes came back up to meet his at the fire in his voice, the earnestness, the vulnerability in his eyes captivating. It was my selfishness. I loved my brother all my life, and it was you that made me realize that I never had his love in turn. You showed me, and I could not bear to. She had wished to hear him voice an apology. She wished for it still, but this might be just as good. And the apology could wait. Surely it could wait now. Was it selfish of her that she would not let him finish? Not when there was so much anguish in him? She stepped up to him, and she brought her hands up to bring his head down, and she kissed him with ardor, and when she was at last pushed onto the bed and rid of the ceremonial robes, their coupling carried in it more desperation than ever before. Mysaria woke in the arms of her prince, and it seemed the brightest morning of her life with her husband. Her husband pressed against her back, and his arms around her, and his lips brushing her hair. What do you wish to name the babe? She blinked, momentarily puzzled. They had never spoken of names. for she knew what he wished the babe to be named, should it be a boy. I thought he would be Balon. Is that what you would wish? It was. She did wish for their son to be named after a prince, a dragon rider, his grandfather. Mysaria could scarce think of a man she would wish to name her child after, but her prince's father's name seemed fit enough. She had certainly no reservation against it, at least. It is. What if it is daughter? What would you wish to name her? And Mysaria had no name to give him either. Not truly. All those she could wish to name her daughter after had been bed slaves or whores. For all that she might have valued the women, she would not wish to burden her child with a name brought about by such a fate. Alyssa. If we had a daughter, I would name her Alyssa. A princess, a dragon rider, a mistress of her own fate. That was a name she could give her daughter gladly. He froze behind her completely, squeezing her a touch more firmly, his cheek pressed to the top of her head. You would do that? For me? A mischievous smile came to her, and she turned her head to look at him. No, not for you, for them. The end. Thank you all for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and hopefully see you next time. Bye!